Let's be real, trying to make sense of the Google Play Malware Policy can feel, well, a little overwhelming. It's complicated, it's super important, and if you get it wrong, the consequences are pretty serious. So in this explainer, we're going to flip the switch and make it all clear. Our whole goal here is to translate this dense policy into practical, straightforward advice you can actually use. Okay, let's get into it.
First up, we're going to talk about the one big idea that drives the whole policy. Then we'll dive into the different kinds of threats Google is on the lookout for, kind of like a zoo of bad code. After that, we'll look at how malware tricks users, and we'll wrap it all up with a simple playbook to help keep your apps safe and in the clear. All right, so first things first. Before we get into all the nitty-gritty about what makes something a Trojan or spyware, we really need to get our heads around the core philosophy. This is the why behind every single rule. And boom, there it is. This is the golden rule. Everything, and I mean everything, comes from this single, simple concept. Keep the user, their data, and their device safe. It's the absolute foundation of trust for the whole platform. Honestly, every single decision you make as a developer should be measured against this idea, because a user's trust, that's your most valuable asset, hands down. Okay, so that's the why. Now let's move on to the what. Google sorts malware into this whole menagerie of different threats. Getting to know these categories is really the first big step to making sure you steer clear of them. So the official definition here is incredibly broad. And the most important thing to get from this is that malware isn't just some virus you accidentally write. It's any code that creates a risk. And listen, this is the part that trips up so many developers. You are 100% responsible for the third-party SDKs you use. Think of them as part of your app's supply chain. You're on the hook for every single piece. As far as Google sees it, their code is your code. So what's the end game for these malicious apps? Well, it pretty much boils down to one of these four things: messing with the device's security, completely taking it over, stealing personal info without permission, or just straight up tricking the user out of their money.
All right, let's zoom in on a big one, spyware. This is all about stealing data. It's code that's secretly grabbing user information and sending it somewhere else. Now, the magic words here, the ones you really need to pay attention to, are without a legitimate, policy-compliant purpose. What this really means is that any data you collect has to be for a clear, valid feature that the user actually understands and wants. If you're just collecting data for the sake of it, you're heading straight into the danger zone.
What's so great about this is how it draws such a clear line in the sand. Look, it's totally fine to collect data if you're upfront about it and get clear permission for a feature that actually helps the user. But the second you or an SDK you're using starts sneakily recording calls or sending data in the background, you've crossed the line. And that right there is why you have to vet your SDKs. You've got to know exactly what they're doing, because at the end of the day, you're the one responsible.
Okay, now inside this whole spyware category, there's this one subcategory, Stalkerware. And Google treats it with, let's just say, extreme seriousness. These are monitoring apps, and the rules for them are super, super strict.
I mean, just look at this list. It shows you exactly how serious they are. You absolutely, under no circumstances, can market these apps for spying on a spouse or partner. End of story. The app has to show a notification that's always on, it has to declare itself with a special flag in the code, and it can only be for legitimate parental control or managing company devices. When it comes to Stalkerware, there is zero wiggle room. Okay, so we've seen how malware can steal data. Now let's shift gears and look at another huge category: malware that's built specifically to trick users and steal their money. And that brings us to the classic Trojan. The whole idea is a bait and switch. Your app looks like something harmless, maybe a fun little game or a handy utility, but it's got this hidden malicious part to it. It's the classic wolf in sheep's clothing, doing things the user never, ever agreed to. And a super common goal for these Trojans is what's called billing fraud. Basically, they trick your phone into charging you for things. This usually happens in one of three ways: through unauthorized premium texts, calls to expensive premium rate numbers, or something called toll fraud. Okay, this is where things get really sneaky. Let me walk you through how this WAP toll fraud works, because it's wild. So WAP lets apps charge things directly to your phone bill. No credit card needed. What the bad app does is it puts an invisible web page over whatever you're looking at. So you think you're tapping a play button in your game, but what you're really clicking is an invisible subscribe button. Bam, you're signed up for a recurring charge, and the app even intercepts the confirmation text message so you never see the evidence. Now here's something interesting. An app doesn't even have to be malicious itself to get kicked off the store. It can be what's called a hostile downloader. This is basically an app that looks fine on the surface, but its real job is to install other, much more dangerous apps onto a user's device. It's pretty much just a malware delivery system.
And Google's not messing around here. They're very specific. The threshold is just 5%. Think about that. If only 1 out of every 20 apps that your app downloads turns out to be malicious, your app gets flagged. It's a tiny, tiny margin for error. And it just shows you how seriously they take this. Because one of these hostile downloaders can act like a super spreader, infecting thousands of devices in no time. All right, so we've seen the rules, we've seen the threats, which can feel like a lot. So how do you actually stay on the right side of all this? This final section is your practical playbook, your checklist for building great, safe apps on Google Play. Okay, these are your golden rules, your guiding principles. You'll notice the themes here are transparency and consent. Go through all your code with a fine-tooth comb, especially those SDKs. Be totally, completely clear with your users about what your app is doing and what you're asking them to pay for. Stick to the official secure tools Android gives you, and if you find a security hole, fix it immediately. And on the flip side, these are the absolute no-goes, the red lines you just don't cross. Don't try to hide what your app is doing. Don't use sneaky tricks for billing. Don't make it a nightmare for a user to uninstall your app. And definitely don't use techniques like dynamic code loading to sneak in bad stuff after your app is already approved. These are all fast tracks to getting your app and maybe even your entire developer account booted from the store. So at the end of the day, it all comes back to that one core idea: trust. The absolute best way to stay compliant is to always put yourself in your user's shoes. Just ask yourself this one simple question every time you build something new. If your code is as honest and transparent as your users think it is, then you're not just following the rules. You're building a better, more trustworthy app. And that's what it's all about.